Bernie Sanders came out quickly in support of this. I've already mentioned that this evening, and John Lewis did too, and Minority Leader Pelosi was pretty strong over the weekend too, and there have been others. But where are the other leading liberals and Democrats? Do you have a sense that people are still hanging back, and what's going to get them to stop doing so?
This is no time to hang back. One of the biggest problems Democrats have is that they forget the power and the passion that the base of the party has. And actually, this is well beyond the Democratic Party. These are just working people all over the country, or people who want to work, who have just had it. To not understand the power of that kind of populism, to not encourage it, to not embrace it, is a huge mistake. This is not a time for cautious politics. This is not a time for saying, well, we better just go a little bit this way or that way. This is a time to fundamentally identify the crooked way this country is being run, the corruption of Wall Street, the ridiculous notion that very wealthy people are basically saying they shouldn't have to help us solve our problems. It's time to take it up a few notches, and I think every office holder and every leader in the country should say thank you to the people who are out there protesting.
Even Paul Krugman wrote in the New York Times today that the plutocrats are panicking. Is that your sense as well, and do they in fact have good reason to do so?
Yeah, and let's face it, sometimes it's even Democrats who are part of this money system, and so there's some nervousness, especially on the Republican side, certainly on Wall Street and Washington where the power structure is. My observation is they're very nervous that this might work. What sort of set me off on this, Keith, was making the mistake of watching Fox News in the morning the other day and watching these people, Varney and the others, mocking the protesters, making fun of the way they were dressed, saying they didn't have, a precise agenda, to which I said, they're not filing briefs at the Supreme Court. They're upset. And so my sense is that there is great fear that this sweet deal that a lot of these people have in both Washington and New York, this unholy alliance between our government and our media and the financial markets and the financial businesses, that this unholy alliance is finally being threatened and challenged. It is a threat. It is a threat and an attack on every working American, and it's time that we upset the apple cart. And I think they are nervous, and they know this has great potential.
All right, how do we upset the apple cart without you in office? And I don't mean that as to blow smoke anywhere, but quite seriously, everybody who's ever stood up for something needs to be on board. I'm not criticizing you for not being in office, but when will we see that happen again?
Well, look, being in office is not what it's all about. Obviously, it's one way to do it. I did that for 28 years. But to me, what we're dealing with here is a situation where Congress can't even vote to overturn Citizens United. You can't do that. The only way to do it is a mass public movement to make it very clear that this Supreme Court decision has to be overturned, that it is a direct attack on our democracy. So this goes beyond electoral politics and who's in office and who isn't. It's much more fundamental. And everybody, in or out of office, has to work together to try to turn this thing around. So that's where I'm focused on right now. And frankly, I like the freedom to be able to particularly focus on this issue. There were many other great issues when I was in the Senate, but this is the big overriding issue. This is what's destroying our democracy, Keith, as you know as well as anybody. Unlimited corporate contributions have to be stopped.
It's called The Panic of the Plutocrats by Paul Krugman. It remains to be seen whether the Occupy Wall Street protests will change America's direction. Yet the protests have already elicited a remarkably hysterical reaction from Wall Street, the super rich in general, and politicians and pundits who reliably serve the interests of the wealthiest 1/100%. What's going on here? The answer, surely, is that Wall Street's masters of the universe realize deep down how morally indefensible their position is. They're not John Galt. They're not even Steve Jobs. They're people who got rich by peddling complex financial schemes that, far from delivering clear benefits to the American people, helped push us into a crisis whose after effects continue to blight the lives of tens of millions of their fellow citizens. So who's really being un-American here? Not the protesters who are simply trying to get their voices heard. No. The real extremists here are America's oligarchs who want to suppress any criticism of the sources of their wealth. I'm sorry, but that's pretty good.
For more perspective on Occupy as the movement goes forward, a pleasure to be joined now by Tom Hayden, civil rights and anti-war activist, member of the California State Legislature for 18 years, founder of the 60s radical group Students for a Democratic Society. That's a great pleasure to talk to you, sir. Thanks for being on.
Keith, nice to talk to you. Thank you.
You were a freedom rider in the rural South as that began, and you were a community organizer in Newark as the country woke up in the early 60s, and you helped focus the rallies against the Vietnam War. Give me a historical perspective. Where does Occupy stand in terms of its start? I mean, 26 days in. Compare it to where any of those other movements were 26 days in.
I think it's difficult. I think this movement needs breathing room. It's just materializing, and it could go in any direction. The sit-in started February 1st, 1960, and spread to 100 cities, 70,000 arrests. Free speech movement started over an incident about literature on a table at Sproul Hall. Nobody expected it. So the future seems to arrive unexpectedly, and there's a danger of trying to over-interpret what's about to happen, but something is definitely happening.
Have you got an idea of what the tipping point was on whatever it is that's happening? Was it Scott Walker and the union-busting efforts in Wisconsin? Was it something part of the movement itself, the arrests, perhaps the 700 arrests at Brooklyn Bridge? What changed this? Because wherever it's going, after the first week or 10 days, it looked like, well, that was interesting and very dramatic, and now it's going to go away. And it's obvious now, the reports are 1,100 American communities, 1,100 have some form of this. What made it jump to the right side of the river, if you will?
Well, I think there's, first of all, 2 or 3 years of increasing desperation in terms of foreclosures, unemployment, job insecurity, young people feeling that their future jobs have already been outsourced. That combined with, like the early New Deal, nothing happened for a couple of years, and then people started to go on strike. Nothing has been happening, and I think the protesters are completely correct that Washington is impossible. I think the possibilities at local levels like Los Angeles or San Francisco, a municipal bank, some of these reforms are possible. There's to me 3 or 4 scenarios, because this can't last. One scenario is that it keeps growing as it has, unpredictably, with no end in sight. 2 is somebody orders the police to crack down. I'm glad Mayor Bloomberg seems to be listening to the advice of his girlfriend, who's on the board of that Zuccotti Park Neighborhood Association. 3, it escalates to civil disobedience and arrests, nonviolent, peaceful arrests on a scale never known before. Probably in my lifetime, it would have to be 20,000 to 100,000.
Wow.
And imagine, though, Keith, if 10 or 20,000 people peacefully sat down in the streets of New York and said, if you don't do anything about Wall Street, arrest us.
Right.
And by the way, we're going to demand jury trials of our peers. The whole system would break down, and the message would not be lost. Or a final scenario, of course, it's always possible. At the last minute, the president could sense an emergency that requires action and do some things that he has not done before, things that he alone can do that are don't require the Senate or the House or the dinosaur elements in Washington. One would be to end these wars. That would be $1.5 trillion. 2 would be to let the Bush tax cuts for the rich expire. That's another $1 trillion. 3 would be to name his own special advisor on Wall Street reform and start appointing people and doing things within the executive branch. And then 4, just lay down the gauntlet and say, look, folks, I have tried with the Republicans in Congress, hasn't gotten us anywhere. This is going to be the campaign of 2012. Please give me a mandate. Something will happen, because these encampments will fester. The one in Los Angeles is interesting. It's not like New York. In L.A., it's right up against City Hall. So you have the beautiful City Hall. The grass is now covered with, by my count yesterday, 250 tents, 500 people. And it's just it's a circle of shame around the center of power. You can't go to City Hall on any business to get your development permit or your tax break or whatever it is you want without passing through these tens of people who are staring at you, who go into the building, who lobby, who go back out to rallies. It's quite serious, and it's amazing that the authorities haven't done anything negative, which is good, but also it's amazing that they've done nothing positive, which is kind of proves the point.
Tom Hayden, I always thank every guest. That was particularly, I think, extraordinarily insightful and useful as we look ahead to where Occupy is going. So I thank you kindly for that and for your time, sir.
Thanks very much, sir. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Wow. And as extraordinary as the first 26 days of Occupy Wall Street have been, there are Occupy movements everywhere. At first we thought the number was 250 cities occupying. Now the estimate is 1,100. Occupy Tucson next.